also want to share just a little sliver of our second lesson, which is from Timothy, 1 Timothy. Do not set your hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but rather on God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. We are to do good, to be rich in good works, generous and ready to share, thus storing up for ourselves the treasure of the good foundation for the future, so that we may take hold of the life that really is life. I think we may not notice it so much, but we are often very driven by our fears. When a child is small, of course, they experience fears of storms, even of big people, and of scary events. But as we age, we try to think that we're master of our fates. After all, we don't smoke anymore, and we're bigger and smarter than those kids, we think. And a lot of horsepower is under the hood of our car. And with any luck, we'll have an increase in our income next year. Nothing to fear. But then, of course, some of those same storms that children fear come to us. And soon we know it will be hard to walk because it's going to be icy. And that stomach ache that we've been ignoring, we've resigned ourselves that we're going to have to go to the doctor, even though we prefer to believe that we're invulnerable. Many cultures have real fear of hunger, everyday raw hunger. But we're few of us that have ever faced that. We're more afraid that last year's slacks aren't going to fit us because we ate too much. But let me ask, have any of you ever been afraid you might lose your job? Or that you may not find one in time to pay the bills? That's a fear that brings us down. To imagine that the mortgage would come due and we wouldn't be able to pay it. Sometimes we let our minds wander into what it would be to lose jobs or a lower pension. And that's fear. That's insecurity. Because fear is so powerful, we go to great lengths to deny it. Or we shore ourselves up against future bad events. So some of us do refuse to go to the doctor because we're afraid of a bad report. We deny the possibility of sickness, although if we went, the doctor might tell us we're perfectly all right, because we're in denial of our insecurity. The other thing we do is shore ourselves up against danger or loss or loneliness or whatever fears assail us. In Kansas, you know, it used to make sense to have those underground storm cellars in case of tornadoes. Now in Minnesota, that's kind of a long shot. But it might not hurt to have a bag of sand in the back of your car. We shore ourselves up. Still, just recently, we have discovered all too well that we cannot shore ourselves up against death with the loss of our friend and loved one, Carol. There's a limit to how much preparing one can do for life, for snow, for drought, for death, or cancer. We're not in control. In a society where we live, we have ample resources. It's an abundant, rich society. So we have tended to slide into our sense of dependence upon stuff. And we pretend that that's what's going to protect us, shore us up. I wonder who here could say that their life is simple enough that they do not have a closet which is full of stuff, clothes and things that they don't need. We have enough, more than enough, more things, enough clothes, enough toys, and yet we are afraid of our insecurity. We feel comforted by our possessions. We feel secure when we have enough stuff. We feel at peace when we have items inherited from aunt and uncle, because it's if they're still around. And after all, we can sell that bowl to the antique store for real money. Abundance, abundance. And the other side of abundance, it's scarcity. If we're afraid we might lose some of our stuff, we get uptight. What if I get to the end of the month without extra money? What if people aren't going to like us if we don't dress in sort of fashionable ways? What if our pension decreases? Now we're back to fear of scarcity. And if we're fear-driven, we may make some poor decisions. Fear of scarcity can make hoarders out of us. And it's a small turn of the coin to move from fear of scarcity to greed. Our children learned about that today in their story, about the townspeople who lived in fear of scarcity and tried to keep everything for themselves. There is, however, an antidote to fear. It's trust. According to George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and Ike and Franklin Roosevelt, it is in God we trust. I think it's ironic that we put that phrase on the very coins that we clench in our fists and hang on to for dear life. But fear comes to us so easily, and trust requires so much trust. And so does faith. I don't think faith is about believing something in particular. I think it's about trusting. Trusting life, even in the midst of storms. Trusting people, even though sometimes they really let us down. And trusting God that no matter what happens in life, God will be with us all the time. The thing is, you can't prove trust. You just have to do it when you get a chance. That's what generosity is all about. Generosity, by definition, means you share and give with no expectation of return. That's trust. Today in our Leviticus lesson, God instructs the people that when they bring in their freshly harvested crop, don't they look nice? They bring in their freshly harvested crop. They should not reap to the outside edges of the field. Leave some of the crop along the sides for the poor. Now, a fearful person who lives in an attitude of scarcity would scurry to get every last kernel or leaf and wonder, do these poor folks really deserve any of my leftovers? A trusting person will follow God's direction and give away the remainders and the leftover grapes. After all, God provided the abundant field. The farmers can be generous and share. Trust me, says God, I'll take care of you. I'm an abundant God.